Hello, and welcome to another edition of Rail Rangers on the Road. The Midwest Rail Rangers, our 501c3 nonprofit organization, presents onboard educational programs across the Midwest. You may have caught us on the South Shoreline between Chicago and South Bend, Indiana, aboard the Sky Parlor car at the Wisconsin Great Northern, on an Amtrak charter organized by the 20th Century Railroad Club of Chicago, on private rail excursions featuring heritage equipment, and at various outreach events such as Train Fest and Mad City Rail. In March of 2020, the coronavirus sidelined most of our programs. After taking a few months off, we returned with virtual programs, taking you to exciting rail destinations across Illinois, Indiana, Iowa, Michigan, Minnesota, Missouri, and Wisconsin. With 2021 now here, we hope to begin the transition back to doing in-person programs. During the months ahead, though, we will continue to bring you new virtual programs as well. So sit back and relax and enjoy another edition of Rail Rangers on the Road.
Welcome everyone to Lake Forest, Illinois. We're going to give you a tour of their Northwestern Depot here. We are with Jim, and he is going to give us a tour beginning now.
Hi, nice to be with you.
Hi.
My name is Jim. I'm the past president of the Lake Forest Preservation Foundation, and I was a project manager on the interior restoration of the station. The project actually began about 12 years ago with the historical, I guess you'd call it feasibility study by Gunny Harbaugh, who was an architectural historian. The Preservation Foundation funded that research, I think, pretty close to the tune of $50,000. And then as it progressed, Metra, the Union Pacific, the city, and the state all got involved in the saving of the exterior of the station. In particular, the roof was replaced, the cedar that was on there is now slate, and the brick was all repointed, everything to the original configuration of 1900, and which is when the station was built. A lot of modifications were done over the years, not all of them positive. For example, in the station interior here, all the wainscoting that you're looking at is really mostly original. We have new oak that was milled to match the original oak, but some 40 years ago it was covered over with cedar beadboard, which took a real beating in a train station because it's a soft wood. The benches were all carved up and too many initials involved with it, and then they had also put down a new floor, but unfortunately it was a glazed tile floor. And so the glazing all wore off, and it left the soft clay underneath. So the floor in here was in terrible shape. We considered also replacing part of the walls and what we would do with it, but found out that the walls that we're now looking at here are actually a secondary wall over the original one. And once we removed parts of it, we found out why they put a secondary wall up, because of all the lead paint.
Oh no.
Yeah, so it would have taken probably another $100,000 just to strip everything, do lead remediation. And so we decided to leave it the way it was. But one of the problems we had, and I'll show you kind of on this door, was that everything was on the same flat surface. And so you really did not get delineation. Well, because I am I guess you might call it an amateur carpenter, I went to my shop and I made this molding to add on, which gave the relief to the single level of the wood in the paneling. So that worked out so well. We literally went around all the doors and the windows and everything else to give a two-dimensional relief to everything. The floor that you're looking at is an exact replica of the original floor, and David was kind enough to lay this down. So this is what the floor was, and you can see that the...
Is this original? What were
That is
those
from
pieces?
1900.
That is it, huh?
That is a piece. So that was all removed, and we had to level the floor because there was some settling, so we had to refloat cement and everything. And then this quarry tile was not available in the United States in this configuration. We could not get 6-inch octagonal. So this came from England, so we had to order everything from England. We had one company that had square tiles, and they volunteered to actually cut them into octagonal shape. So when we calculated it was going to take 40,000 cuts to get what we needed, we figured they could never be precise enough, so it would be a perfect look. So we ordered this from England, and then proceeded to tear the floor out, tear everything, re-level, and reset everything.
Wow.
The city was very helpful and very cooperative with their people. They did most of the mechanical. They did all the mechanical work. So any of the heating or electrical or air conditioning changes that were done, we did not get involved in that. Ours was all primarily cosmetic. So all the chair rail at the top, all the molding, everything else is all new and redone to match what the original configuration of the train station is. Initially, the train, when the station was built, we only had electricity 4 hours a day. So they had gas lights, electricity, but mostly it was daylight. They were dependent upon sunlight for everything. Right here, you might see there's a piece of wood that was plugged in. This was for a wall sconce that was once there, and what we have on our walls now are a small replica with the faux gas light above, electric light below. Well, this is what they had here, except you can see how low it would have been. So if this were still in place, I would have walked straight into it because it's so doggone low. So we decided not to try to put anything there, raise everything up to current standards in terms of height. And then also, another key factor here were the benches. The benches were removed. They were taken off-site, completely stripped, refinished. A lot of the graffiti that had been carved in over the years was filled. It's barely noticeable. They did an excellent job with that. The other thing that was somewhat ironic is that even besides having electric lights, there were no outlets, no electrical outlets in the station. So people who needed to charge a computer or a cell phone or something of that type had no place except maybe over in what was the bank building on the north end, and they would sit on the floor to charge. So one of the things that we did is when we rebuilt the countertop in front of the platform window, we added electricity outlets as well as USB charging ports. So now the person waiting for the train can come in here and plug in and have an outlet while they're waiting for the train.
USB regular plug.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Didn't have USB in 1900, I guess. Huh?
And even despite the reflection, which might be a problem on this display cabinet, those are original photos of the two architects who designed the train station, and I'm sure David can give you more information on their background.
Kind of see a little reflection, but we'll try.
And David will give us some more information about them.
Okay.
Right.
All right.
So part of also the exterior work, all the windows were all rebuilt and refashioned, but everyone felt it was important to keep the original glass. So we did not upgrade to double glazed glass on this, because this glass is actually rolled glass, not floating glass. this. So you will see discrepancies and waviness in the glass, which we wanted to retain from a historical perspective. The other thing that we also wanted to bring back, and was through David's research, was that I mentioned earlier that we had very little electricity and had to depend on daylight. So what they actually built the station to have was a skylight over the ticket window.
Oh, very
And
cool.
this came in from dormers. Well, the dormers were, the faux dormers were replaced, but there's so much mechanical apparatus up there now, there was no way to do a real skylight. So what these are actually are LED panel lights, color temperature of daylight, and we put a drop ceiling in, and then I mentioned I like to do carpentry work, so I built all these windows in my shop. They're all removable, you can slide them out and get to the lights if necessary, but when these are on, when the ticket office is open, you would bet that it's daylight coming through, so it has a very strong daylight effect that replicated what occurred in 1900. The floor, as I mentioned earlier, came from England, but we weren't sure exactly of its exact look. So I was talking one day to the ladies in the barber shop, and I was standing next to their sink, and I happened to look down, and they had the old tile floor that I had mentioned. And I see a little bit of red. And I said, and so it went under the sink. I said, would you mind if I take that panel off? She said, fine. So I took the panel off, looked under the sink, and here was the original floor tile there, as well as a piece of marble that we were able to replicate for the base.
Look at that.
Here.
Yeah. So all from that,
All from
just that barber shop.
Just looking
If you
at
wouldn't have had that, you
the
wouldn't have known. Wow.
Then these parts were also restored because the oak was original into here, but there was original doors here, and you can see where things were pieced in a little bit where the door framing was. So we had new oak made to match the original oak here, and then had this all retrofitted so that it would be a continuous and harmonious look to the wainscoting, in this case with the oak beadboard. What else do we have? Again, there were 2 gas lights and 2 electric lights on either side. So this was, the city dropped electricity from the top. These were not here before. And so we put these faux gas and electric lights on
Cool.
to replicate what was. There is a, and you know, David has a key to the other side, and you can get a look in there later.
Okay.
This was a bank at the northern end.
Oh,
But
okay.
you can see what the floor was like that we replaced to take it back to the original floor once you go in there.
All right.
So,
Well, we moved outside on the platform here at Lake Forest, and Jim's going to give us some insight about the sign that is above us.
originally Gunny Harbaugh, when he did his report, found pictures of the train station when it was originally built. However, it was difficult to see what exactly the lettering looked like on the signs. Dimensionally, we could estimate what it was from the exterior dimension of the building, and then realize that the sign was about 14 feet long and 18 inches tall. The problem that they had in years past, the sign was always wood, and wood in this environment doesn't last very long, and it also has to be repainted, even if it's still sturdy. So what we decided to do was take the original design and actually have a welded aluminum sign made on a 1/4-inch aluminum plate. This was done in Gurnee at a welding shop who I chose because they also happen to have a powder coating facility. So this sign is powder coated for durability. It's made out of aluminum. The letters themselves are also aluminum. They came out of a specialty house in Atlanta. These are laser cut letters on a 1/4-inch aluminum that are backbored and drilled and mounted into the aluminum. They also are powder coated, and at least they tell us it has a lifetime guarantee. So we'll have to see about that.
Yeah, there you go.
But and then later, with further research that came out, we found that we had hit an exact replica of the lettering style and everything to some other photographs that came up later. So we are very pleased about the outcome, because we did a lot of research to try to make sure we had the right typeface for the period, and as it turned out, we do.
So now he's going to tell us a little bit about Lake Forest's preservation processes.
Lake Forest is a very unique community and city. It's one of the few communities that has not only a city commission for preservation called the Historic Preservation Commission, but it also has a nonprofit independent preservation foundation, of which I was the president of at one time. Both work hand in glove together to try to maintain the unique architectural and visual history of Lake Forest. We have many, many homes and many estates in this community that go back to the turn of the century, because this was where the elite industrialists of Chicago would come for the summertime. So you have the Armours, the McCormicks, the Swifts, the numerous old family names, industrial families of Illinois that have homes or former homes in this community. One is now a school, another is a whole development complex. Some are still intact, but Lake Forest takes great pride in its historical and its architectural heritage. And it doesn't mean that we can save every old building, but it has to have some architectural or historical redeeming factors involved to it. So we won't just save an old garage that's falling down because it was built in 1912, but if the home has history. There's a home that is being restored right now in Lake Forest by a young couple. That was the Great Gatsby house, and it was with the Arthur, who's Harvard Van Doren Shaw was the author or architect, but the Scott Fitzgerald had visited the home, and
Wow.
and the daughter of the family was his inspiration for his story of the 20s. So F. Scott Fitzgerald was here. So there are a lot of stories like that in Lake Forest, and the community is very proud of it and very supportive of it. And it's a very charming and wonderful place to live.
Do you guys have a website, or if people want more information at all, or?
We have a website. It's lfpf.org.
Okay, we'll put that on the bottom of the screen, lfpf.org.
Yes,
And if people are interested, they can.
And each year we sponsor many house tours of many of these homes, garden tours, because many of the homes have wonderful landscaping and gardens that, without being part of the foundation, you would never have the opportunity to visit. It's been a real revelation to me. I've lived here for 35 years, but I've been involved with the Preservation Foundation for the last 6. And I've learned more in the last 6 years than I did in the first 29 years. So
Very nice.
Very cool. That would be something that we would need to come check out sometime.
Yeah.
So what do you think, if you had to pick one thing, what was the most challenging thing in the restoration of the depot?
making sure the details were right, especially in the floors. The guys that did the floor installation said the joints, the lines have to be dead on accurate. And they are. And that took a lot of measuring and a lot of skill to get everything off, because the floor was not always level. Some places underneath we had to shore up with beams, the sagging. Other places we had to float new cement in. But I would say getting the accuracy of the joints and the joint compound and everything right on the floor was critical. There's a million other little details I won't bore you with, but it was a fun project. and it was a full-time job, even though I'm retired, for about 3 months here. But it was great and a lot of fun.
Well, thank you very much for joining us today. We'll move on, and David is going to give us... Hello, everyone. We're now joined by David Mattoon, and we're still here in Lake Forest, and it's going to get noisy in just a minute because there's a metro train coming. So we'll let you watch that as it goes by, and hopefully we'll get in a few words before then.
My name is David Mattoon. For 25 years I was a computer programmer doing train simulations, modeling for accident investigation and locomotive engineer evaluation and testing. 13 years steam locomotive engineer, Federal Railroad Administration qualified when that came out. At Mid-Continent Railway Museum, and I worked at the library, the Historical Society, and the Preservation Foundation, all on railroad issues.
All right, we watch the metric come through. It's a live broadcast. You never know what's coming through.
Alright, enough train watching. Let's get back to business.
Alright.
Okay. And two other things, I've been involved with Operation Lifesaver for train safety and the DuPage Rail Safety Company. So we can start walking down here, and I'll tell you some of the history, and I'll start at 1958 rather than the 1900 station. 1958, Northwestern was on a cost-cutting exercise. They closed 23 stations on their commuter stations on the north, northwest, and west lines. And then in the next year, 1959, the First National Bank bought a portion of the station to use as a bank. And then in 1960, the first of the main stations, like Clybourne Station, was torn down. Highland Park was torn down in that era. So whether it was for business reasons or not, the fact that the First National Bank bought a portion of this station for a bank is probably what saved the station in existence. It was very common in the City Beautiful movement to have a parking lot, a park around every station. And there was 7 years negotiation ending in 1960 between the city, between Lake Forest University, and the Chicago Northwestern to turn this park into a parking lot. So I'm keeping an eye on here. And we're just about at Forest Hoodoo. There we are. So I'll stop right here. And when they turned this into a parking lot, what they did is they truncated those platform roof sheds. So like where it says Lake Forest, that whole structure is a platform roof shed, and one on the other side. Those platform sheds came all the way out to where we are now. They were designed to screen out this area, which is now Market Square. Because in the 1900s, this was considered a slum of Lake Forest. They did not want any commuters or any long-distance passengers going through here to see this area because it was stores with junk piles, scrap metal, and a lot of stuff. So this was all screened off. And so those platforms were truncated. Here's a version about 1905. You can see the long platform shed roofs and hip dormers, and notation on the original Frost and Granger architect saying this shed, meaning the east one, must match that in every particular. So this line was double tracked in August of 1890. So that platform shed roof dates from somewhere between August of 1890 and 1898 when the plans were drawn up for this 1900 station. So when these platforms were truncated in 1960, they just chopped it off and put in a plywood gable end. So part of the restoration was to redo the hip dormers. Couldn't extend the platforms any further. We redid the hip dormers.
What do you got there? Old blueprint?
No, we're doing a video.
We're doing a video.
Oh, okay, sorry.
So now you can see more of this station here on the left, and I'll actually be going alternating left and right. So the first peak gable is the women's waiting room. Then the other peak gable is the men's waiting room. Between the two gables is the station agent with the bowed window, so he could keep track of all the trains going through. He had to telegraph when any train passed or left Lake Forest. Above that are two dormer windows, and those dormers are important. They lit up an unfinished attic, but we'll see later why they were important.
What happened to the tunnel?
We'll get to that. Now over on this side is the waiting room to the north. The section here on the right is the baggage area. In the center was a waiting room, and on the left was a stairway for a tunnel that passed between the two stations.
Okay.
So was this depot divided like that one was, with the ladies on one side and the men on the other?
No.
No?
No.
Okay.
There wasn't enough.
Not space.
Well, the other thing I would imagine is more people would probably be going to Chicago. Would that be right, David? Than they would be going to Milwaukee or...
Sure, they'd be going down to Chicago to work and coming back and then leaving right from here home.
Okay. Some more people, yeah, so...
Right along this axis here was a grade crossing, or at grade crossing, and but that was fenced off and locked by a baggage man.
So people wouldn't run across the tracks, is that...
Right, because there was a tunnel for them to go underneath the tracks, but this lock gate would allow the baggage man to carry baggage trucks
Okay.
between that baggage room and this baggage room.
So it was never for if you were just a rider, you would have to use the tunnel.
Right, you would have to use
But
the
he,
tunnel.
he would just unlock that for himself and,
Right.
and drag. Okay.
And I volunteer at Mid-Continent. This happens to be used as a project workspace. But I noticed that was Chicago Northwestern.
Nice.
So this tunnel, the actual tunnel here was closed in 1970 for vagrancy.
Oh.
Then about 7 years, little argument with the businesses in Market Square and the city. They wanted this passageway here. So in 1981, they built an at-grade crossing for everybody.
Oh.
And then 2013, Union Pacific officials were here. They saw all the commuters crossing, even when the bells were ringing, the lights were flashing. So they took out that crossing again. So now people then have to go.
Well, I guess we have another train to watch.
Yep.
And here comes another
I
one.
tell you, when you're live, you just you just gotta go. People will come up to you, ask you questions, and trains will come by, and so I guess we'll watch the train.
Metro commuters, your attention please. The next outbound Metro train from Chicago is now arriving in your station. For your safety, please stand behind the yellow line until the train
So Robert really just wanted to hear your attention, please. The doors are about to close.
No, I believe it was caution. The doors are about to
because
close.
he does that in our personal vehicle too.
Yes, every time I close the door. The next stop will be Lake Bluff.
All
right.
So let's continue on.
Okay, so look at this window treatment here. You have two windows on the left side here, balanced by two windows on the right-hand side. A very symmetrical appearance. So we'll come back to that in a little bit. Notice that there is a metal plate between the two tracks there.
Oh.
What?
The metal plate.
Aligned with the south end of this.
What do you think that is? Candace will do a guess, and I'll do a guess. What do you think the metal plate? I'm gonna go for an Is there an electrical cabinet or electrical work
It
under
looks
there,
like
like
it's removable. So maybe a stairwell.
a stairwell or an electrical panel?
Okay.
Are either of us close?
Well, you'll just have to wait.
Oh, okay. All right, fine.
Wait and see.
Wait and see, boy.
You notice that platform shed roof is in a peak, and this one was in a peak, so you would go through here and you get a cathedral ceiling effect. But then around 1980 they decided to remove that because the pigeons were up there, so they put in this false ceiling. So we come around here to the other side. Here's signs for the Lake Forest Preservation Foundation and our website.
All right.
Just in case you didn't catch it
Yeah,
earlier.
lfpf.org. We'll put that back on the screen. So
And,
check them out, support them as much as you can.
And you can search Google with HSR, which stands for Historic Structure Report, on our site and find more about this station. We won't cross here. We'll come here and look at the warming shelter on this side. So you got two windows on that side, balanced by a window and window.
That's weird.
Yeah. So why isn't it symmetric?
Is there a bathroom on one side like here that you wouldn't want a window?
That's the baggage area. This is the pedestrian area. This is the stairwell for the tunnel.
The baggage so people wouldn't see inside the what had expensive Marshall Fields and Armor's baggage, maybe?
The
Or
window
the stairwell.
is to light this staircase with natural sunlight.
There you go.
Oh, okay.
And notice the brickwork with white mortar. There's nothing particularly special about red bricks and white mortar. But something you'll hear about later.
Okay.
So we'll come back here. And by the way, there's a metal plate between the two traps there.
He's going to keep us guessing.
He's not going to tell us what that is he?
Not yet.
Maybe in part 2, I don't know.
So this Chicago-Milwaukee Railroad built in here in August of 1854. Built past through there. Chicago-Milwaukee Railway. And the Milwaukee and Chicago Railway built from Milwaukee down, and they met in 1855. And I'm keeping an eye on where I am here.
That's a good thing. We don't want you to trip on live television. So, yeah.
Okay, so now we're even with the storefront of that store that has the bow windows.
Okay.
Again, that platform shed roof came all the way here, blocked off this complete area here, which was the slums of Lakeport.
Slums.
And right immediately south, so someplace in here, was an elevator crossing tower. So here's one at North Freedom. It's on the Wisconsin Central at originally Neenah, Wisconsin. But you can see it's up elevated. So they had an elevator crossing place here. The crossing watchman would pump the gates up and down with a hand pump pneumatically. He would control the gates at Deer Path and at Westminster, the opposite where we started. They also had a crossing shanty over at Westminster, but then in 1926 they had a terrible accident with two trains in there, so they put an elevator crossing shanty at Westminster as well.
I think there's one of those at Mendota, right along the Burlington Northern, maybe. There's a replica that one of those elevators. So that was for safety. So it was easier, better for them to be elevated than just have a little.
Right.
Interesting. I've always wondered that. I learned something too. I didn't know that.
By the breaking of the Prairie Museum.
Yeah, the Mendota by the replica church when we went to did our eclipse trip in 2017 that David was a part of. Yeah.
So then in 1859 there was a railroad that went bankrupt from Chicago, went through Janesville, emerged from bankruptcy as the Chicago and Northwestern. So the Chicago and Northwestern.
I think I've heard of that one.
Yes, originally ran northwest out of Chicago. These two railroads, Chicago and Milwaukee, two railways, Chicago and Milwaukee Railway, Milwaukee and Chicago Railway merged into Chicago and Milwaukee Railroad. And you no longer had to get off the train, walk across the state line.
Did you have to do that?
Yes, according to Elliot Donnelly, who gave a history of it.
Okay.
History talk.
That wouldn't be fun. Imagine carrying all your baggage, not just walking across the state line, but hauling all your stuff that you might have with you.
Right. And so let's see. The Chicago and Northwestern was afraid of another railroad, which eventually became the Milwaukee Railroad, of buying this line, the Chicago and Milwaukee Railway. So Chicago Northwestern bought this and bought most of this in 1865 and rest in 1866. So they would have direct access to Chicago.
So right after the Civil War, pretty
Yeah.
much.
And interestingly enough, they did not have an 1865 annual report because they didn't want people to know what they were doing.
So this line was that important to them that
Oh, right. Yep. So there's 4 stations here. The first one was in 1859, and it was a shed, and it was there for only 1 year, and then it was moved down 3 blocks that way and became a kitchen to a person there, one of the founders. 1903, the kitchen caught fire, spread to the main house and burned it down. Second one was built in 1860, and that lasted from 1860 to 1886. In 1875, they expanded it. They pulled the 2 parts apart, but that was fancy because it was paid half by the residents of Lake Forest, the town of Lake Forest at that time, and half by the railroad. Then in 1886, they built the third one. So in 1886, the third one was built, and then it was moved down just across from the Deer Cap. So during the construction of the 1900 station, so that allowed continued service. Oh yeah. So in 1857, when the wealthy people bought up land in here, found Lake Forest. This was the plat of Lake Forest. It went a mile to the lakeshore on that way, and here's the railroad, and it ended at essentially that highway, which is still called Western Avenue. Western Avenue because that was the western edge of the original town. So the second station was moved across the tracks and became a dwelling point. The 1886 station was moved about 2 blocks that way and 1 block north, and was originally the Sunday school for the First Presbyterian Church until they added on for that. Then it was owned by the Board of Education of the city, but used by the American Legion until they purchased a building down that way. And then it was used by the Methodists until they built that Methodist church across the tracks there. So this 1900 station was built by Frost and Granger, Charles Sumner Frost and Albert Hoyt Granger. Marvin Hewitt was the president of the Chicago Northwestern, and with a little bit of help of his wife, they begat 2 daughters. And with the help of Frost and Granger, they gave Marvin 2 sons-in-laws. So that's a great business proposition to marry into the president's family. But Frost and Granger built a lot of stations, about 125 in the Midwest. Frost originally came here with Charles Ives Cobb, and they built the presidential church. They built Wheaton Station, which was actually now moved and enlarged, and it's the gift shop for Crosby Zoo, Cosley Zoo in Wheaton. So now we're here at milepost 1/4.
Which is actually what, 20,
A mile, a quarter of a mile back there is milepost 28.
28. So we're 28 and
So the station's at 28.3 mileage from
downtown Chicago.
downtown Chicago.
Okay.
So Cobb and Frost worked together. Then Cobb got the appointment to do the Newberry Library, and one of his requests was to dissolve the partnership as part of that. So then Frost worked alone, and then he teamed up with Frost and Granger, and there's speculation that Granger may have felt later that he married the wrong daughter, and then that led to the split up of the partnership, and Granger went to Philadelphia. He did architecture for the War Structures Board after the war, or around the war time. Then he came back. Frost himself worked alone. Probably the building most noted, general public would most know about in his final period when he worked alone was Navy Pier Auditorium.
Oh, sure.
So here's a bell, Southern Pacific locomotive bell. That's a monument to the first president of the Lake Forest Restoration Foundation.
Can we ring the bell?
Sure.
Wow.
And we need to back up here for one other thing. Notice the boiler room chimney. We'll be seeing that several times in our tour. Okay, so this is the best view that you have of the baggage room. The roofs were originally slate, and part of the 2011 restoration there was to move them back to slate. And 86 or so, they had a wooden cedar shingle roofs to give an old-time feel, but they didn't have the funds then available to put actually slate, so we put them back to slate. If you look about halfway up, you'll see a series of triangles there. Those are snow guards. They're called other things as well. When it melts, the ice and snow tend to run off in a sheet. Those will break it up so that anybody walking by will be annoyed by the ice and not injured by the ice. And so we come over here now. And remember on the warming shelter, we had red brick and white mortar. Gunny Harbaugh, looking at black and white photos, realized that this was red brick and red mortar to give a solid appearance to this. But there's accents on this end here. These are called quoins, Quoins. And back in even pre-Roman times, you could have a rubble wall, but you needed a solid stone at the corners for strength. And so you obviously don't have a need for that in brickwork, but by making that white, it's an homage to that style of architecture. And over here, there's a metal plate between the tracks.
He's not going to tell us what this metal plate is. You're going to tell us at some point, right?
Oh, maybe.
Oh, okay.
If you have enough room.
Oh, okay.
On that Granger photograph, right near the gables is the 45-degree angular train order boards, blades of the train order signals. And here inside the station are the red handles for the for the east and west track, railroad designated east to Chicago and west away from Chicago.
Mm-hmm.
So when we go to the ticket window, if you put the camera right up at that, let it glare, in the corner you'll see those red handles.
Says you'll see the red handles if you put the one all the way up to the window.
Near the light that
Oh, up. Yes, up in the corner, those
Right.
two.
red handle ones.
Right. Yeah, you see them. Yeah, kind of right now in the center of the screen. Above the hand sandy. Yeah. Okay.
Then we'll go back this way again. By the way, there's a metal plate between the
Oh, the metal plate. Yes.
So now the
You're making people tune in for part 2 of this video in the first week of October coming up here. I think that's what
Just
you're.
to see what the metal plate is.
I think that's what he's doing. So people come back in 2 weeks and watch the second part of this. So
here's the
here's the metal plate. No.
no, this is the baggage room.
Oh.
After it was no longer needed for long distance baggage, it was a satellite facility for 2 different dry cleaners. And now we've made it Americans with Disability accessible restrooms. So we'll come back
Put our mask on to go indoors.
Yes.
Here, I got the deal.
We'll talk about these lights a little bit later, depending on the order. So this area is what we call the gallery, but actually this half of it was the men's restroom. And then when the women's restroom became the part of the bank, and that area off limits, we had to cram a men's room, a woman's room, and a foyer into this area.
Wow.
And back over here, this would be the back of the newsstand. And the actual newsstand has been changed into a bulletin board with crossbow lights and gray drum.
And that's what we saw at the beginning of the video. Okay.
I was lucky enough with lots of research to find a photograph, which I have here on my shirt.
Yeah, I'll zoom in on your shirt, I guess. All right.
Right.
All right.
Yep.
A walking prop. I love it.
Sure. So this is the gas electric combination fixture that was here. It's hard to see in this view, but there's a half globe, which is gas, because you need oxygen to get to the gas flame, and 2 spherical globes for the electric lights. That's because the Highland Park Electric Company started at 4:30 p.m. and shut down at 1 a.m. There was no daytime demand for electricity. So you could do gas lights during the day, or if enough natural sunlight, particularly in summer, you would keep those off because of the heat. You didn't want to add more heat to the building. And there's a rounded arch, which has been squared off here.
So that would have been right here is where we're looking. Okay.
And outside, we saw the dormers light the attic, and that sunlight came through this skylight.
Okay.
And this has been done with LED panels, and originally it was on a timer, so it would come on at dawn and shut off at dusk, but I guess they're saving even more electricity that way.
Fine. Mm-hmm.
Okay. Okay. Let's go back here for 1 second. Oh, sorry.
And then we'll wrap.
Any of them?
And then we'll dump. Yeah, I'll dump and.
So this area here is a smoking room. This
Ah.
wall did not exist. And this paneling in the smoking room was brought out here. There was a window there and a light just like this one on that lit this way, and a window here and this light which lit that way.
That's the one. Yeah, he pointed out. Jim pointed out earlier. Yeah.
And that was in this area. So again, you could put the camera right against the
Yeah.
window glass, and that's now a shoe shine. But that was floored off. That was the steps to the tunnel.
Oh, right under the chair.
Yep, just the whole floor.
The whole floor was where we would. Okay.
And of course, they took out the windows because he needed storage space, or I assume that's why they took out the windows.
Right, cool.
Okay, so would you like to break there?
So you're saying that so you're not going to tell us, you're not going to show us the tunnel, and you're not going to tell us what the panel is until we meet again in 2 weeks from tonight, I guess, is what you're saying. We're going to come back
Right.
because we're getting up near just before 8 o'clock. So we are. What does that mean? We got to wrap it up. We're going to come back in 2 weeks.
That's right, we're gonna make that drive again.
All right, we'll make the drive down here, and I guess we'll have to stay tuned. We'll put a big to be continued at the bottom of this. So if you want to know what that panel was, he kept bringing up the panel, and then I guess we're going to get to go through some kind of secret tunnel that's been closed off that normal people can't go through. Is that right?
Right.
Okay, I guess you'll have to tune in. We'll see you, I guess, 2 weeks from tonight,
We'll
Candace?
see you in 2 weeks.
All right.